Craig Breslow and his defenders have been doing a lot of spiking the football for the last week, especially after they won game one. They made the playoffs, they won a game in Yankee Stadium, and there was a lot of replaying and regurgitating of his quote from the Devers trade of, listen, we're going to win more games than we do the rest of the way. And as far as the Devers trade is concerned, for the rest of the regular season, it really bore that out. I think we should probably unspike that football, so do the rewind thing, because last night's game, they lost because of the roster moves being made. I don't want to hear that they were injured, they had injuries or any of that other stuff. Players that they thought would pan out didn't pan out. Just look at the Yankees, all right? Started the season with Paul Goldschmidt and DJ LeMahieu on the right side of their infield. Both of them stunk, all right? So they had Ben Rice, who was able to be a starting first baseman in a playoff series. As far as second base, they had Jazz Chisholm Jr., they had Cabrera, they had Ahmed Rosario, who started last night. They had other players who feel Ahmed Rosario was actually huge for them. Anthony Volpe did not live up to expectations during the regular season, and Cabrera was able to help them right that ship. Their ace Garrett Cole got hurt, right? Their best pitcher, maybe the best pitcher in the American League, coming into this year, and they were able to find other starters. So when we're looking at that, and obviously yes, Roman Anthony is a huge loss there, and they had other injuries they had to deal with, but that's October baseball, and you need to build your team ready to insulate yourself from those sorts of losses. And it's really hard for me after you just lost to a team that lost Garrett Cole for the season in spring training to be like, oh well, the Red Sox are really decimated by injuries. What are they supposed to do? They lost a guy who wasn't even on the team in April. No, build a better roster, Craig, and maybe don't spike the football about trading a guy who, by the way, do you guys know who led the league in OPS this year on the Red Sox among players who with at least 70 games with the Red Sox?
Was it Devers?
It was Rafael Devers. As bad as Rafael Devers was after the trade, all right, if you took his stats, including from the Giants, and put them on the Red Sox, do you know where he would rank OPS-wise on the Red Sox?
Third.
Yeah, tied basically for second with Rob Refsnyder, who only hits against lefties. So I don't want to hear this that this is Craig Breslow's spike the football moment. No, they did. They won. They exactly hit expectations, but there was so much more they could have done if they had had a better roster.
I was surprised to hear that Felger had that take. I think it was after game one about how the Devers trade should already essentially be cemented as a win. And he was saying at the time, he's like, because, that quote, Breslow came out, they said that they were going to win more games than they otherwise would have. And they did, because the Red Sox were, quote, better without him. But it's also they got nothing in return. The guys that they got in return did not even participate in the series.
I wish Mike was here today. That you have Masataka Yoshida and Ceddanne Rafaela batting 4-5 in an elimination playoff game.
Yeah. And so the minor leaguers, whatever, we can get to that point at a later day, but Jordan Hicks and Kyle Harrison did not throw a pitch in this series, if I remember correctly. And it's yes, you're right.
Thank God. And Hicks I actually, you know what? Once, if you had told me that for sure that the Yankees would win, I would have liked to have seen Jordan Hicks pitch, because I would love to see how far Stanton could hit.
But exactly. But it's just that's I have a hard time calling the Devers series a win. I don't think it was complete failure like I probably felt it was in the moment. But for you to get nothing in return from him is just, I don't know. It's that you can't be spiking the football for Craig.
I also like don't understand this. I actually wrote this in an article a couple weeks ago. It's just I don't understand this argument that there's a finality to the decision of like who
Yeah.
won this trade. Like okay, in the immediate, yes, like Breslow can put his head on the pillow at night of all right, well we did win more games and like I can run through with that. And Devers had some regression in San Francisco and they missed the playoffs. Like that's not where this story ends, especially in the fact that you still have Jordan Hicks under contract for 2 more years at 12 million a year. And Kyle Harrison still has development to go in terms of a total rework of his arsenal. Um, you know, you have a prospect at the back end of that deal that is still in the lowest levels of the minors, and then you flipped the other prospect in that deal who was picked either I believe one pick before or after Braden Montgomery, who obviously got moved in the Crochet deal, for a rental in Dustin May, who made a few yeah
Yeah.
I don't know, like inconsequential starts, and
Also
then
didn't
got
throw a pitch
injured and
this
was
year.
not an option for a game three start where you had to go with, rookie who for the time through the lineup did meet the moment, but going into the season, I don't know. This was talked about on like the Mass Live podcast the other day. Like, I don't know if you just go into the season, where is he ranked on the starting pitching depth chart? Like 18th. There's no way that like the story of this trade is over. Like you knew in 2020 after the Mookie trade, like where the direction was going. Again, like they finished 12 games under 500 in a 60 game season, and Mookie goes out, makes a ton of plays in the playoffs. They win the World Series, and you know that that's a start of two very different directions. And the story was over immediately in that season, even when it wasn't even a full 162. Like you knew where the direction of that was going. This story is not over, especially when they're gonna if they get to a point next season and Jordan Hicks is not fixed, and you have to think about a DFA or something, and you have to eat money. Like that's still part of the story. And when Devers is an All Star again next year with a 950 OPS at the All Star break, like the story is still going. I think like when they need to move forward with this and understand like what consequences played, there's a 2017 comparison and is not the one of they're on the doorstep of a dominant run at 18. It is to get to where you want to be. There is a real need for power in the lineup that is certainly not there. And that was the biggest issue at the end of 17. And you really see it in the lineup
That's a
last
good
night
point.
where there was no power at the end of 17. That team went the entire season without hitting a grand slam, which was one of the bigger talking points of that year. And you were relying on Benintendi and Betts and Bradley Jr. and Bogarts, who were not at that point until the next season, which they did grow into, they weren't power threats and people in October who you could really trust to hit the ball out of the ballpark. Benintendi did have one in game four that year, but there really wasn't a power threat or guys that you had to fear in that lineup. And that obviously really sparked the urge and the priority to go get JD Martinez that offseason. Nights like last night where you miss a Devers in the order are exactly what we're talking about here and why that comparison is so needed. And it makes this offseason really tricky because that year, obviously, you watched a couple power bats move, and Stanton got traded to the Yankees. You go out and you get JD. The options to do that this winter are really, really limited because,
Pete Alonso to
yeah,
Boston
I
confirmed by
I've
Tim
really
Curley.
talked, yeah, I've talked myself into the Alonso thing quite a bit, specifically in the sense that like I don't know one that people would make the financial investment around here to get a Kyle Tucker, and even then, so that creates another outfield issue that you still have to work around and still didn't work around last offseason. And while I think everybody would be thrilled for a Kyle Schwarber reunion, you're working against Dave Dombrowski in Philadelphia, and that's not a sure guarantee that I don't think Schwarber's really going to get to a true open market. Like I don't my confidence level in Schwarber leaving Philly, even on an expiring contract, really isn't that high. It's the same way I probably wrote like 20 articles for our former employer 2 years ago about how once Aaron Nola hits the market, this is who the Red Sox need to target. And he never got there. He never got there. And I think it was like late November when he signed his new deal. So there is a need for power in this lineup after the Devers trade. I think that is the most glaring thing right now of thousands of little bite-sized pieces you can make of the state of the trade at this point, but it is a very 2017 feel where you're relying on Rafael to strike lightning in a bottle, or even Anthony when he was here, like it wasn't a huge power threat until later. Like you need an established guy in October who can put the ball out of the ballpark, which is why I think moving forward the Phillies are the best team, like are best slated to win because they have the formula of October. You need like horses at the top of the rotation. You need a lineup that hits the ball at the ballpark. And for the first time, really, I feel like in their tenure, they have a lockdown closer in Duran. Um, there's a true need for power, and how they address it is good. It's going to be a really slim margin for error in terms of how they pursue that this offseason.